music. And we make big circles, like you do with the Stones. We make big circles and we sing, ah, and we put our souls in each other. You dig? In other words, and we have sex with each other. Right. We do all the things that you guys are not allowed to do in your culture. But in the culture I live in, we throw all that out the window, and that's what I guess you'd call Satan.
The so-called Manson family was a sort of parody of patriarchy. So part of the revelation was that you could be living in a commune and do all these hip things, and yet and still be the incarnation of some, you know, very primitive form of social organization, which was not a transcendent improvement upon the normal American family, but rather something barbaric.
I was a California Highway Patrolman assigned to the California Highway Patrol office at Oakland, California. And during the 60s in the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Area, there was a lot of turmoil, a lot of demonstrations and riots all over the Bay Area. And I transferred from that area up here to a quiet area. And then 2 months later, that's when we went on the Manson raids in Gold Wash.
I learned about the Manson situation when my boss came into the office one day and said that law enforcement had received some rumors or reports of people out in the desert, namely out in and around the Panamint Mountains in the southern part of the county, running around in dune buggies, sex orgies, drugs, random sharing of affection, doing things that just weren't quite accepted here in Inyo County.
Searched the building, and in the small bathroom area, in a commode under the sink, the door began opening and this figure crawled out. He had been in a fetal position in the cupboard, crawled out and stood up in front of me and said, "Hi." And at that time I asked him who he was, identify himself, and he told me, Charlie Manson. On the way down, he impressed upon us that his group was trying to find some place to be alone because the blacks were going to rise up and overwhelm the whites. There was going to be a bloodbath, and he stressed that we, in uniform, number one, were cops, number two, we were white, therefore we had 2 strikes against us immediately. And he strongly recommended that we let them go and we flee for our lives.
Helter Skelter is what? Race war? How long has there been a race war? How long have we been in race war? English? How long have we been at war with races? Since we come out of the caves and you didn't like Irishmen? It's been a race war. All my life I've been in the middle of a race war.
What Manson and the family wanted to do is when they saw that the blacks weren't starting the revolution, they wanted to start the revolution and blame the murders on blacks, and they wanted the murders to be so horrible that whites would get incensed and start going down into the black communities and start killing blacks in retaliation.
The word pig was printed in blood on the front door of the Tate residence, and the words "death to pigs" were printed in blood on the living room wall at the La Bianca residence. The word pig in 1969, in the 70s, it became a word used by the counterculture movement. But in 1969, pig was a word used by groups like the Black Panthers, the black activists.
No more brothers in jail. Off the pig. The pigs are gonna catch hell. Off the pig. No more brothers in jail. Off the pig. Pigs are gonna catch hell. Off the pig. No more brothers in jail. Off the pig. Time to pick up the gun.
People followed the lead of the Black Panthers, who were considered the vanguard. Most of the movement was white and middle class. And there was a lot of guilt about racism. And it was felt that black people and other minorities, they'd been living under the worst conditions in our society. And they had to resort to violence, whereas maybe white middle-class kids could often be pacifists because their lives weren't threatened in the same way. Cops would much more willingly hold a gun to the head of a minority person and be more violent toward them.
The image of the Black Panthers was when they went to the legislative meetings and they had their guns because it was legal. And that image scared a lot of white America because they saw blacks with guns. Even though it was legal, it was a scary image. And Manson played into that fear by trying to blame his crimes on the Black Panthers. Any con man knows that you have to take something that has a level of credibility to it. So Manson exploited the fear of white America by blaming his crimes on blacks.
I can reach in your mind and control your fear because you're a coward. I'm going to play any game I can play on you all the way to the White House. And then when I take over, I'm going to laugh and say, you were a bunch of weak people. I don't see how you made it this far.
In the latter part of '69, the Weatherman faction declared that they'd cut all ties to civilization, that they were admirers of Charles Manson, that sticking a fork in a person's belly was something to go wow about. Wild was the word they used. And they shared with Manson the sense of the necessity to go beyond, to be as outrageous as possible. And that's why the Weathermen celebrated Charles Manson. They named Sharon Tate an enemy for no apparent reason than that Charles Manson had been complicit in murdering her. And they declared that Manson was the incarnation of this spirit of transgression, or the sense that whoever did something wild and as outrageous as possible was a comrade in arms.
I just remember a magazine, I think it was called Tuesday's Child or something, and I guess they labeled the 1969 as the year of the fork, because when Pat Krenwinkel left a fork in Lena LaBianca's stomach, she wrote war on his, I believe it was his belly, the fork might have been in his chest, and when questioned on the stand why she did that, she said, this is one man who won't be sending his son to war. So the war being a big issue in the 60s with, you know, many, many people, that's probably why they chose to adopt Charlie as a, what do you call it, hero.
I look back and I feel embarrassed by the enthusiasm with which I regarded the Weather Underground for a short period of time. So these are mistakes. I never did anything violent. I was never aligned with them. There were moments when you heard that maybe the Capitol had been bombed or a building had been bombed, that property had been bombed, and I was happy. And I don't regret that. That was wonderful.
This is revolution, that there is absolutely no justification, and that the only thing you can say about the perpetrators of these outrages are they are typical of Hitlerian stormtroopers, and I think we've had enough of that for one lifetime.